when you look at what Brittany's done and what she's gotten out of it, millions of dollars, people are just, there's white hot anger out there. I was reading some of the comments on a Daily Mail article on her compensation, and people are furious. I am too. Because the pattern is, you get the media, the government, and you get all this juvenile, childish, infantile behaviour and arguments and media packs and ridiculous emotional statements. And then at the end of it, they go, all right, where's the fucking Consolidated Revenue Fund? Drag some fucking millions or billions out of that. Anyway, I've been poking around the articles and some government information, and I think I've got a bit of an idea of what's going on here. So the first clue that jumps out is what they say her case was about. It's got the documents set out Miss Higgins' intention to sue for sexual harassment, discrimination, disability discrimination, negligence and victimisation. Nothing about psychological trauma. Apparently she was in hospital according to the ACT prosecutor who dropped the case, or for the alleged assault itself, which of course was never proven in a court of law. Now, it wasn't a workers' compensation claim because they have very rigid protocols with how they proceed. You don't just put it in one day's negotiation. Yep, all done. Here you go. I think the claim was made under this scheme because this ticks a lot of the boxes that apply to her. So it's the scheme for compensation for detriment caused by defective administration. I never heard of this before today, before I went looking for it, so it's not well advertised. And point one there, the CDDA scheme is a discretionary mechanism available for non-corporate Commonwealth entities. It allows an entity to pay compensation when a person or organisation has suffered a detriment as a result of the entity's defective administration when there is no legal requirement to make a payment. Okay, well that's the first box that's ticked that applies to Brittany. This is a really informative page. I'll put a link to this. There's a lot of sections. I'm just going to highlight the ones that pertain to this video on Brittany. So if it's not legal and it's not going before the courts, well, who's the adjudicator? Well, it's the portfolio ministers, and they can also appoint people to decide applications made under this scheme. And this scheme, I think they're taking a lot of liberty here. They're claiming that they can do this under executive power of Section 61 and 64 of the Constitution. Now, I'll go back and look at that. But already you can see the scope for scamming it. The paragraph ticks another box that's applying to Brittany, and according to the principle of the Privacy Act, they must be treated as confidential to ensure adequate protection of the claimant's privacy. That's why they haven't disclosed anything. So after 2 years of doing media interviews and shoving a face at this March for Justice rally, there's thousands of people there, she went on a National Press Club. She actually addressed the National Press Club. And, you know, some people cover their faces when they come out of court. Not Brittany. She come out there, got a fucking dial right for everyone to see, and the media obliged her. Now, that guy that she's with, that's apparently her partner. He's the mastermind behind this scam. He's the one that, you know, really went after the big bucks for her. Now, I saw someone do a deep dive on this guy, and according to them, he teed up the interview with Wilkinson that kicked it all off, because the actual incident happened in March 2019, and the Wilkinson interview didn't happen until February 2021, not nearly 2 years later. So he's the one that instigated it from what this article said. But of course, there were many collaborators. You know, Lisa Wilkinson, there's no way she would have had Brittany on if she hadn't checked with all her contacts in government to make sure. Because all they care about is hoarding ill-gotten wealth. That's their number one priority. And it all comes from public funds. So she would never have risked that. Anyway, let's get back into it. Here's another box that ticks. Documentary evidence is not an essential requirement. So there wasn't the range of documents that I had assumed before I discovered this scheme. Following up from that, where evidence of defective administration is limited, an assessment must seek the balance of plausibility. So they don't even say balance of probability, because probability is a mathematical term, and you need to show a weight of evidence that's above 50%. You don't need that, just plausibility. So all those claims that were at the start of sexual harassment, sexual discrimination, all the assessor needs to do is go, yeah, that sounds plausible. Tick. No evidence. That's fine. I don't think anyone's going to like this. Determining level of compensation. There is no financial limit on the amount of compensation payable under this scheme. Unlike workers' compensation scheme that have strict limits on how much they can pay out. But it does say, really, you've got to take into account to restore the claimant to the position they would have been in had defective administration not occurred. So if all that discrimination and all that had happened to Brittany, she was so talented, she would have made $3 million by now. If only she was given the chance and wasn't forced to go to Lisa Wilkinson. So determining the detriment, compensation is only available, only under the CDDA scheme where the detriment has been found to have suffered by a complainant has arisen from a direct result of the defective administration. Yeah, you sort of run into problems when you don't have to produce any fucking evidence. Hard to hold paragraph 53 to account. And the guts of that lengthy paragraph is basically, did Brittany do everything she could to try and minimise the loss before she went to them asking for money? Of course, her fucking travelling media roadshow did the opposite. So where compensation is to be approved for non-financial detriment. Now, that wasn't included in that article, but that's not to say, because we can't see the document, she hasn't gone for it, such as pain and suffering, inconvenience. We wouldn't want Brittany to be inconvenienced with, or other qualitative, not quantitative, elements of that nature. The decision maker is not to approve the payment without first having regard to relevant legal principle and practice and arriving at I'm sure that was all done. Now, the decision maker must give consideration if the claimant has contributed to their loss. They've also got to give consideration as whether the claimant gave false, misleading or incomplete information which the entity could not have reasonably expected to challenge or clarify. Now, if this was the stoush between her and Linda Reynolds claims that Brittany had said stuff or didn't say stuff that she's now saying she did. So I know it's all theatre, but it's their theatre. We could always use that against them. Now, here's how we know it's not workers' comp. This is from Victoria, but it'd be uniform across the country. The payouts are limited. So the maximum amount this year is $317,000. Next year you'll get $325,000. So if you've lost both hands, lost your eye, lost your feet. If you look at the bottom two, they really go into the detail. Like apparently your left hand isn't worth as much as your right hand. What if you're a lefty? So if you lose your toe, it's down to 20 grand. But look at the quadriplegic, only gets $325,000. That'll be next year. Now, how much did Brittany get? $3 million? And she's walking around perfectly okay, perfectly fine, quite chipper, I'd say. I think she's out of hospital, probably popping a few champagne corks. Now, if it has been done through this scheme and by the process of elimination, this is the only scheme that appears that it could be, well, there's one restriction here that's in our favour. So it says it's permissive. It is very permissive. Fucking tell us about it. That it does not oblige the decision maker to approve a payment in a particular case. However, the decision to approve or refuse a payment, so that means approve, must be publicly defensible. Well, there's your fucking FOI request, because this is the rules of the scheme. So they might be able to make some details confidential, but if it needs to be publicly defensible, you can certainly ask how much and why. And that's what I intend doing. And if other people watching this, please do the same thing. Put in an FOI request like I'm going to. And I'm also drafting a letter of demand that if this payment hasn't been made, it's not to go ahead. Or if it has, her bank account is like this with the robo-debt. They just took it out of people's account. Just take the money back out of all her accounts. And Shabaz's accounts. What are these scam artists? Now, I've intentionally left this to the end because the topic's a bit squeamish for some, I would imagine. Look at the top one. Now, this is this workers' compensation payouts. Top, loss of power of speech, $190,000, $195,000. And look at the fifth one down. Loss of your appendage. It's less. You ask any guy, I'll put my hand up and go, okay, there's a choice. I know which one I'm keeping. I'm not keeping the power of speech. How is that more important? I mean, I'm serious. What? Loss of speech. That'd be a blessing sometimes. Imagine how many inane conversations you could get out of. I mean, you'd learn sign language, but most people don't know that. So you get out of all these conversations. What's the equivalent for sign language from a lost penis? I mean, can they transplant them? Oh, nah. You wouldn't want that anyway, would you? You'd be handling another man's. Anyway, they're way off the mark here. By the way, the testicle one, they're not, though. I agree with that. One testicle, 32,000, both 153, because that's not a linear, it's not a double the damage. That's, you've lost the whole functionality there. So anyway, I'm working on a document that I'm editing at the moment that I'm going to send off for a freedom of information request and also a list of demands, because there are enough people, from that comments that I saw on that article, people are furious about this scam that she's pulled off. And you can see what's in it for the media. They got that Me Too bullshit they ran with for 2 years, trying to, undermine the strength of the society, separate men and women, make out like we're a nation of sexual deviants, just, women are under all that sort of stuff. And the politicians, well, they're told to go along with that as well from the people that fund them. So, yeah. So anyway, look, that's it for this one.